Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Steven Brown, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about contracts, but specifically, bad contracts. And have you ever looked at a contract and say, well, that's a good player, but damn, that's expensive? Or do you ever look back on a deal and you're like, I know why that team did that, but wow, that was a bad contract when they signed it. And then there are some contracts that you just look at and you're like, you really didn't have to do that. And then there's contracts that you look at and you're like, whoa. I figure I'd save myself a little bit of trouble and hate in the comments section and not just make this a top 10 video of just bad contracts in the NHL. So without further ado, let's jump right into that. And these contracts are the contracts that people sign and you're like, I know why they did that, but wow, those are bad contracts. Now, give me a second to explain myself. I'm going to highlight a couple of them and then let the more obvious ones slide. Louis Eriksson with the Vancouver Canucks. This is a contract that I look at and I go, I know why you did that. But looking back on it, this is a really bad contract. Coming into the season when he signed the deal, he scored 30 goals, had about 60 points with Boston. But I mean, Vancouver's logic there is basically like, oh, he's a half-decent Swedish player. Let's throw him beside the Sedin twins because he'll produce. And Vancouver's been trying to ditch him for well over 2 seasons now. And you're probably looking at the list and saying to yourself, Steven, there's a couple of good goalies there. And I know Sergei Bobrovsky's won 2 Vezina trophies. I'm pretty sure he's the only active goalie in the NHL to accomplish something like that. But it's just like, man, $10 million for the next 7 years for a goalie. Those guys are just voodoo, just waiting to collapse on themselves. And I get why Florida did it. He was kind of the last piece that they needed to really push them over the top, and a lot of people really like this signing. But to me, when I evaluate contracts, I like to look at the deal and ask myself, is there room for this player to outperform this contract? And with Sergei Bobrovsky, I really don't see room for him to outperform that deal. He's gonna have to be godlike in the net just to live up to it. All right, now this next one is gonna really hurt some people because these are good players with really bad contracts. All right, and they should be up on the screen right now. Let me explain myself before you get all upset in the comments section. Habs fans, it's not so bad of a contract for you with Shea Weber, but for the Nashville Predators, it's a nightmare waiting to happen. Remember earlier in the offseason when Roberto Luongo retired and the Vancouver Canucks were hit with that cap recapture penalty, and everyone was like, ooh, I mean, it kind of saves themselves from going out and signing really bad players to really bad deals, which we'll get to in a little bit. And if you're a Nashville Predators fan, you're either praying that Shea Weber plays out this contract, or there's a handshake agreement that he just goes on LTIR and he doesn't retire. Because the last 4 years of that contract, oh my god, would that cripple the Predators. Now, Zach Parise and Ryan Suter are both amazing players, but they're already 34 years old, and if I'm a Minnesota Wild fan, that term scares me. I mean, there's been a lot of research in hockey of when players actually hit their prime and when they start falling off, and I mean, Ryan Suter and Zach Parise have stood the test of time so far, but I don't know how much longer Father Time's going to be on their side. And as for Kevin Hayes and Adam Henrique, they're both great players, and I'd take them both on my favorite team, but not for that price tag. Now, this next classification of a bad contract is what I'm going to call, why did you do that to yourself? And to me, these are contracts that I look at, and they're contracts that could be avoided if you just draft well. I mean, if we're looking at the screen here, Justin Abdelkader, $4.2 million. Jay Beagle, he's a 4th-line center. Brandon Dubinsky, I mean, when he signed that contract, he wasn't really particularly good. Brandon Tanev, $3.5 million for 6 years. Are you out of your mind? Now, Cal Clutterbuck was once a part of the best 4th line in hockey. Whatever you want to call that, $3.5 million is way too much for a 4th liner on any contending team. Danny DeKeyser, I mean, most of you probably never even heard of him before, so the fact that he's making $5 million is a little bit wonky. Martin Jones is, I mean, I understand why they gave him that contract, but for me, it was just way too soon, right? He had one good season, one good playoff run with the Sharks, and they kind of threw it at him. And in hindsight, if they would have waited, maybe bridged him for 2 or 3 years, they wouldn't be sitting on a $5.75 million goalie with an under 900 save percentage. And don't get me started about Mikko Koskinen with the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, that contract was signed days before Peter Chiarelli was fired. I don't know why they let him approve that deal. I don't know who. You know what? It's better that I don't try to explain what Edmonton does. All right, the last tier of bad contracts. These are the contracts that take the cake every single day of the week. And I'm going to use an expletive here because these are inexcusably contracts. I'm going to do a little bit of editing, hopefully bleep that out because I do not want to get flagged, but they're up on the screen right now. These contracts are indefensible. There is not one redeeming factor to any of these players right now. Now, I might take a little bit of heat for putting Brent Seabrook in this low a tier and talking about him like this. I mean, this guy is a former Olympian. He has won 3 Stanley Cups. But if you look at the way that he's performed since signing this contract and the trade rumors that were swirling around him and the way that the Blackhawks have kind of had to operate around contracts like him that they have on the books, it doesn't look too good. And one interesting thing that I'd like to point out about these contracts is that 6 of the 7 players that are on the screen right now either have a modified no trade clause or a no movement clause. And when it comes to things like the Vegas expansion draft, the Seattle expansion draft, this really screws your team over because you're forced to protect them, right? And if there's a guy on the bubble that has some value, you're gonna end up having to expose them and taking that risk. And I'm willing to bet that at least 3 or 4 of the 6 players that have modified no trade clauses and no movement clauses end up being bought out in the week before the Seattle expansion draft or in the year leading up to it. And at that point, they're just dead money on your books and you can't do anything with them. Or you're put in a position where you have to give up a first round pick, second round picks, prospects, maybe even a roster player to Seattle, like what happened with Vegas when they did their expansion draft, and nobody wants to be put in that position. So I'm going to go back to the intro outro screen to close out the video here. And guys, I just want to say thank you so much for clicking the like button, for just watching the videos, for getting this far into the video, for interacting with me, whether it be on Twitter or on the comment section. I really appreciate it, and I'm always open to a discussion, right? Most of these videos are just done for fun because hockey's a game and games are supposed to be fun. So I hope that you don't take things too seriously, especially with this video. If you happen to have a couple of favorite players on this list, I'm sorry. But that's going to be it for this one. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more because more is coming. I'm having a lot of fun doing this and hopefully you guys can see that. Thanks so much for watching and take care, everyone.